welcome to the University of Dubuque and the Wendt Character Initiative Lecture. I'm Anna Lee Ward and I'm the Wendt Center Director, a center whose mission is rooted in the university's mission and in its Reformed Christian identity. A mission that is set up to engage the university community in a cooperative and spirited effort to foster intellectual understanding of and personal commitment to leading lives of purpose and excellent moral character. That's a mouthful, but it's a wonderful mission, and it's a real privilege to be here tonight and to have you here with us. I'd like to begin tonight with a word of prayer, so if you would join me in prayer. Creator God, in you we live and move and have our being. We give thanks for the abundance of creation and all good gifts which come from you. Yet in times of challenge, we often turn our eyes from you and from our neighbors and communities in fearful protection of ourselves. Forgive us, gracious God, when doubt and fear and uncertainty cloud our living and limit our imaginations. Forgive us when we abandon the common good for our own individual gain. Grant us courage to work for a world that reflects your goodness. Remind us with the gentle breath of your Spirit that we are truly in this together. Breathe life into the dry bones of our public debate and policy making, that we might resist the temptation to point fingers of blame and condemnation, or to cling to individual self-interest and quick fixes. Empower us with the vision to see that another world is possible, and this evening may our sight grow clearer. We pray this, God, in the knowledge of your sovereign rule. Amen. Tonight, we have the honor of hearing from a winner of the prestigious John F. Kennedy Profiles in Courage Award, and someone that I've had the privilege of counting as my friend, whose story I watched unfold. What would you do if friends and neighbors, fellow churchgoers, and community members stopped talking to you because of a public stand you've taken? Would you have the courage to move forward? Would you have the strength to take the more difficult road? Our guest tonight never intended to be one of those few lonely voices speaking up to the intolerance around him. As a bricklayer by trade and an active community member, he ran for mayor because of his vision to make his town a better place. He never expected controversy to come to the sleepy Chicago bedroom community of Palos Heights, but it did. And he's here to share his story. Please welcome former Mayor Dean Koldenhoven.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Ward, for the kind words. And to all the Islamic people here, I say assalamu alaikum. And to everyone else, I say, may peace be unto you. Thank you. And for anyone who knows the answer to this question, just shout it out when you know it. What are the last two words of the Pledge of Allegiance?
For all.
For all, right there. Thank you. And at this time, if you're able, please rise and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I was born in Chicago, and we were the only Dutch Protestant family among all Irish Catholics. It was great living that way. There's two things you had to be, though. You had to be a Notre Dame football fan and a White Sox baseball fan. Then life was easy. It was a good experience living in the city. We had St. Killian's Parish right close to us there, and I learned a lot about the Catholic Church that I would have never known otherwise, so it was great. And at the age of 15, my dad bought a farm, and my dream came true because I was a horse-crazy kid, and I had 3 horses on the farm. And to this day, I still ride a horse, and I teach my grandkids how to ride also. While I was living on the farm, I did farm work also for a local farmer, because when asparagus come in, they can be 1 inch high in the morning, and by evening, with the right weather, they can be 10 to 12 inches high. So when they do come in, they really come in fast, and they need extra help to harvest the crop. I did that. And that man asked me one time, he says, I'm getting busy at my job as precinct captain. That's a person that distributes literature for elected officials running for office. And he says, could you help me? And I said, sure. He's a nice gentleman. You can't hardly turn him down. And I did it, and a year later he says, you know, I'm really getting tired of this job because I did it so often. He said, could you take it? And I said, sure, I'll do it. So with the help of my little kids helping me, running door to door, putting information on their doorstep or ringing doorbells, it really was nice. So that was my first introduction to politics. I went to Chicago Christian High School. At the time it was in Chicago. Today it's in Palos Heights, Illinois, the school is, and I graduated on a Friday night, and then Monday morning I was a bricklayer. So I started my bricklaying career, and 42 years later, I gave my business to the 2 sons that I had, and I've been selling brick for the last 16 years. So I'm still working, and I'm also a project development person for a construction company in the Chicagoland area. I've been living in Palos Heights since 1972. Mayor Simpson was the mayor at the time when I started living there, and he asked me, he says, with your construction experience, would you be willing to be a zoning commissioner for the city? It's a volunteer job, and I did that for 8 years. And there were some members of the city council were not fair to the mayor that was mayor when I went there. It was Mayor Strack. She was a female mayor, and I didn't like the way some of the aldermen were treating her. And I knew she would never be able to make it the way they were harassing her, even at the meetings and out of the meetings. So I ran for mayor because I didn't like what they were doing. And I ended up being elected. I won by 156 votes, but it only takes 1 vote to win. Palos Heights is a small town. It's only 12,000 people. And the role of the mayor is for a 4-year term when you're elected. As mayor, I had the usual problems. We had a fence dispute. I think somewhere in America at all times there's a fence dispute going on. During my term in office, I gathered $9 million in grants, and we put up a new metro station. It started out as a $2 million project that ended up costing $6 million. It's a typical federal project. And we built a police station, mostly from federal money again, but this is different. Customs, U.S. Customs asked our police officers if they would join forces with them for 1 year, just one officer. And they go after drugs and the people that sell drugs. And when they confiscate money, that money is distributed among the people that are all in this group together. And we get about 5 to 6% of what they get. Well, to make a long story short, we got a $3.5 million police station paid with drug asset forfeiture funds. So it does work. Get the money from them and make a police station with the money. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, word on the street that there were Arabs or Muslims buying a church in Palos Heights. I knew only 1 Muslim person in Palos Heights myself, and there are 11 churches in Palos Heights. They all happen to be of the Christian faith. The Palos Reformed Church was up for sale in private market. They asked other churches, and then they asked the city of Palos Heights. They asked us formally if we would like to have the church. So our committee and city council took it and studied, and 3 months later, they had no answer. So that means it died in committee. There was no interest in it. The Al Salam Mosque Foundation came along and put a deposit to purchase the church when it was put on the public market. They put a deposit for $50,000 to buy the church. It was a $2 million purchase, $2.1 million. At a council meeting, there's an average of 20 to 30 people. And that night, when I got in there about 10 minutes to 8 to an 8 o'clock meeting, I noticed that the place was packed, and I was wondering, what on the agenda did I miss that why there's such a crowd? And there was nothing that I could see, and there was in excess of 100 people, which is a lot for the small city council hall we have. Some people come there to a city council meeting because they got business before the council. They might have a building permit they need. They want to know if it's going to be passed, so they show up. The rest of the people show up because they might not like watching TV and there's more entertainment at a city council meeting. So on the agenda, there's a thing called citizens wishing to address the council. You can say whatever you want, you just can't swear, and you can't talk to anybody in the audience. You got to direct your question to the chair itself. And all at once, the remarks against the Muslim people started. The Muslims were subjected to many derogatory remarks. The residents and aldermen alike said, your religion is upside down. You worship on Fridays where we worship on Sundays. It's like apples and oranges. We don't want that. Also, one person, an alderman, said, if someone had intervened early on to stop Adolf Hitler, there might not have been a world war. What he was saying was, stop the Muslims now before they move in. Little did he know that there's already 450 Muslims living in Palos Heights. A reporter for the Southtown Star newspaper asked the man, he says, would you like to retract that dreaded Hitler statement you made? And he said no. So naturally the story went out. He regretted that awful in the years to come. Residents tried to persuade the alderman to buy the church for their sudden need for recreation. They gave all kinds of reasons why we needed that church building for recreation. They went so far as wanting condemnation proceedings. That's called eminent domain. The right of a government to appropriate private property for public use, usually with compensation to the owner. And the process is you have to have petitions with people's signatures on it, and then they bring it to the council. Well, the council, they did that, and the council had a vote and it said no to it because the city had a bad experience earlier. They had tried to get a farm property for the metro station, and they lost and they bid for that with eminent domain. They lost over $1 million over a 5-year period in the courts. On a Saturday morning, I was working in the front of the yard, and a neighbor of mine walked over, a former fellow church member, an attorney, and he said, hey, Mayor, with the Muslims moving in, what will happen to our home values? I responded, when are you moving? Because there was such a thing in a neighborhood that in the areas there was called white flight in the Englewood area of Chicago. All at once, suddenly, the real estate people were making great money and selling homes for people. They scared them. They said, the African Americans are going to be moving in. You should sell your house now. And a lot of them did, and they all moved south, all the towns south of Chicago. And this attorney went on to be a protester's attorney. He was doing pro bono work for them. The anti-mosque activists went out and gathered over 1,700 signatures, and the council took no action on the request. There was one more request after that, and that failed also. When the controversy arose, there was a much different feeling toward me. Some members of my church spoke out at the city council meetings about their dislike for the Muslim people. The thought went through my head, how many hundreds, if not thousands, of sermons they have heard in their lifetime about love your neighbor, and they just don't get it. There is a new president of our seminary of the Christian Reformed Church. He just started, and I happen to know the man, and I visited him a few weeks back, and I asked him, could you revisit those sermons you're doing about love your neighbor and get all these new young preachers out there getting it so it means something? Apparently we're missing something because the people just like they never heard that before. There was a Catholic priest in town from St. Al's Church, Father Cronin, and he was standing up for me and saying things in off his own pulpit also. He spoke out and he says, I will not be part of any movement to derail any churches or religious organization the opportunity to worship. And anyone who is should be ashamed of themselves. The home for a new rec center can be found elsewhere. Father Cronin was not well liked by some parishioners. In answer to the murmurings of some in the church wanting Father Cronin to leave because of his position on the mosque, he responded, "I'm staying." Father Cronin was a true friend throughout this controversy. There were many meetings at City Hall, and it got so crowded, we had to get the school gym, which is about almost the same size as this gym here. And there was over 450 people attending. They were lined up, and all the seats were taken. They lined up the walls. They had the media there. Everybody was there. And at the start of a meeting, I say, each in their own way ask for guidance. That's a simple prayer followed by what we did, the Pledge of Allegiance. There were people who came up to me before the meeting and told me that I had to do what they wanted, and I explained about the Pledge of Allegiance. When you say that part, "and to the republic for which it stands." A republic is a form of government whereby the people elect officials to decide things for the good of the people. It is not a referendum for naysayers. The next day, the Muslims had pictures in the paper of them. There was about 6 Muslim women in a group, and the photographer got the picture. They were not saying the pledge. And my phone was ringing off the hook at City Hall, and my secretary, my assistant, took the calls, and her process of getting the calls is that she tries to talk to people, and if they want to talk to me, she writes the phone number down, and I call them when I get in there. And they had, I don't know how many people wanted to call back, a lot. And I answered them by saying, they have a freedom to say the pledge. You don't have to say it. You can say it or not say it. There's no gun to your head making you say the Pledge of Allegiance. And in the meetings, there were many derogatory remarks going on about, go back to your own country. We only want Christians here. I'm not going to lie to you, one said. He said, we don't want them. And they made remarks about their clothing that same night in a packed gym such as this. There was a lady in church. She followed me out of the church. I was walking to the parking lot. She says, "Mayor, you like Muslims, but I don't like anyone from the Middle East." I said, "Jesus was from the Middle East." This all comes about by a fear of not knowing who the Muslims and their religion are all about. We have a tradition in our church about shaking hands. They start the service, and the minister does a few things, and then he says, "Okay, let's all greet our neighbors," and they turn around and shake hands. And all at once, I did that, and I noticed the people behind were facing the other way, went this way, and they turned around. And I went back again, and they were facing me, but this time they looked right over my head. They did not want to shake my hand. It got to the point of that. So that was a tradition that we still do it, but it was different. I gave this speech in Moscow, Russia, and I'll get into that later, but there was a girl that asked me, what did your friends do? How about the friend support? And I couldn't answer her. I said, I'll get back to you. And there's a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, and he said, "In the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." During this controversy, a resident made a statement on Channel 11 television, WTTW, and said she objected to false religions coming into Palos Heights. A Muslim resident graciously commented, "I think people like this woman have so much love for their religion that they turn against other religions." He added, "We have fanatics in our religion too." There was a Muslim teenage boy at the gym that night. He got up and he spoke out and he says, "Hey, I grew up here. I played basketball with your kids in this same gym that we're in tonight." He says, "I ate at your dinner at your homes, and now you don't want me to worship God in Palos Heights?" There was a deafening silence. It was close to midnight when Alderman made a motion to purchase the church for $2.1 million and give the Muslims $200,000 to go away. The motion passed by a 5-3 vote. In discussion, they said they wanted recreation. And you know that they were hiding behind a veil of hypocrisy. There's a book written by Lorraine Hansberry called Raisin in the Sun. It's where a white community offered to pay a black family to stay away, much like this. That same meeting, I called that vote an insult and an embarrassment to the Muslim people. The very next morning, I wrote a letter of apology to all the congregants of the Al-Salam Mosque and to all the Muslim community. The rules of veto that a mayor has is you must make your veto at the next regularly scheduled meeting, which was every 2 weeks we had a meeting. But because it was the 4th of July, we automatically don't have a meeting. It was a holiday. And so it was 4 weeks later that the time came for me to veto it. And during that time, it was a really hectic month that people were really up in arms about it. The newspapers were full of it, and they were wondering what I was going to do because they didn't tell nobody what I was going to do ahead of time. And there was an atheist who questioned me on the 4th of July about my religious beliefs with mixing it with government business. And also, along that lines, Harvard University studied it, and it says, yes, it becomes clear in letters Koldenhoven wrote to religious leaders in Palos Heights that his religious beliefs, as much as his belief in the First Amendment, led him to defend the mosque. During that 4-week period, there was much turmoil. Many residents expressed their anger to me. It hurt me when people who were so good in other ways showed hatred in this issue. If this were another Christian church buying this Christian church, it would not have made any news. It would have been stuck on page 12 of the real estate section. When the reporters asked me how I arrived at the decision, I told them it was a no-brainer. In grammar school in the 7th grade, I learned of the First Amendment to the Constitution, where it states, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And also because I am a Christian, I believe in what Jesus said, to love your neighbor. There is no deep theology here. You know what is wrong, so you do what is right. Our pastor, his name is Pastor Hamster, and every Sunday, in some form or another, he got it through that says, love your neighbor. It was either on a bulletin board outside the church, it was either on the bulletins handed to you in the thing, or it was in his sermon or in his prayer. He made sure that he covered it. As mayor, I sent 2 letters to the pastors of the 11 churches in Palos Heights asking them to preach sermons on religious tolerance and loving your neighbor. Some people and some journalists objected to my actions to write an official letter on city stationery to the pastors. I called my actions freedom of speech, and as a mayor, to keep the peace. Discrimination is nothing new in the United States. We've seen it used against the American Indian. We slaughtered thousands of American Indians as we pushed westward to lay claim to a land that was the American Indians' land. When I hear the song, This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land by Woody Guthrie, I wonder how those words would affect an American Indian who once could call all of the United States his or her land. We ended up putting them on reservations where they can barely make enough to support their families. And we called them savages. In the days of slavery, the African American were listed as property as 3/5 of a person. Slavery historians remember that it started out as the Great Compromise. It turned out to be the 3/5 compromise. How would you feel being counted as 3/5 of a person? The Irish in Boston, there was a sign in the window that says, help wanted, no Irish need apply. The Japanese Americans, when World War II started, they rounded up all the Japanese from Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and put them all in internment camps in mostly the deserts of Arizona and California. And it took many years later, and finally President Clinton offered an apology to Japanese people that were left. And now discrimination is against the Arab Americans and Muslim faith people. Maybe someday sociologists can tell me what it seems society needs someone to hate at all times. History has seen extremists in religious matters before. The Crusades of 1,000 years ago, when the extremist Christians told the Muslims that if they did not believe in Jesus Christ, they cut their heads off. We have seen extremist Muslims kill Christians in different countries, even during these very recent times. There are extremist Christians, but not all Christians are extremists. There are extremist Muslims, but not all Muslims are extremists. Extremists for any cause are a danger to all of society. Before 9/11, we had terrorists. There was Ted Kaczynski of Evergreen Park, Illinois. He was known as the Unabomber. He killed 3 people and wounded 23. over an 18-year period. They had envelopes with bombs in them. That's terror. Timothy McVeigh from Oklahoma City bombed the Murrah building where 162 people died. When this happened, word went out that Middle Eastern men were seen driving away from the scene in a brown pickup truck. It turned out that McVeigh and Nichols did not fit the description of Middle Eastern-looking men. That's one of the dangers of profiling. The public had already developed a hatred for Middle Eastern people. Again, this was before 9/11. Terrorism is a crime. It is not a race. It is not a religion. The three major faiths, Christian, Muslim, and Judaism, all believe in the same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We differ on the identity of Jesus, and we have to identify and dwell on what we have in common. In a debate, it lets one side listen to the other in order to find flaws and to counter its arguments. In a dialogue, it's let one side listen to the other to understand. Dialogue is the answer. People say the Muslims believe in Allah. Allah is the Arabic word for God. We use another word for God. We call him Jehovah, Yahweh, and etc. Inside the dome of a mosque there are inscribed 99 attributes to God. Words such as merciful, compassionate, king, and 96 others. We need to get to know the Muslims better, and there is a way. A call from the Justice Department to my office. There was Ken Bergeron from the Community Relations Service. And he asked if we could start dialogue groups in Palos Heights because he considered it a hot spot. I got Trinity College to donate a room for us, and I recruited 8 Muslim people and 8 non-Muslims to start the meetings. In the first few meetings, everybody was being very politically correct. They were kind of really careful in what they said, both sides. And then finally, one non-Muslim woman asked a Muslim man, he said, "Is it true that if you die as a martyr for your faith, that you go to heaven, you get 72 virgins?" He said, no, you got that all wrong. He says, it's one virgin and she's 72 years old. And during those talks, there was a professor from Trinity College, Mike Vanderweel, and a Muslim man named Omar Najib. He was an attorney, and they headed up this dialogue group. And it was the longest running dialogue group of its kind in the United States. They lasted for 6 years, and they finally just ran out where it was peaceful. And they're ready to go at any minute should anything happen. There was a Catholic lady that had commented, we don't need to convert each other. We just need to come to some respect and understanding. I have found out that the Muslims do not want to be converted or evangelized, but they do want to know more about Jesus. How good is that? I was invited to speak at their convention twice. A while back, I was asked to pray for the Syrian people at the mosque in Villa Park, Illinois. At all these events that happened in Palos Heights, the media was really great. Everyone covered it. All the TV stations, the local ones, and even from abroad. BBC covered it, and NPR radio, emails from all over the world. Southtown Star, Sun-Times, Chicago Tribune, all gave me their support in their editorials that they wrote. And I got a call one Sunday afternoon right after church. We have a custom in our house to have coffee and cake, and a phone rang, and it was BBC, and they could hear the noise in the background, everybody talking, and they said, "Can we call back in about 2 hours, and we'd like to interview you about the mosque situation?" And I said, "Sure." So when I got back to them, I thought they were just going to talk generalities of what it was about, and they knew everything. They knew the aldermen's names, they knew the quotes that they said, and I thought, wow, they really did their study. So BBC does a good job. And 2 days later, I got a call from I got an email from my cousin in the Netherlands, and he says he was out camping in France, and he heard the radio station live, and he says, that was nice to hear you talk on there. Imagine BBC doing that. It's just unbelievable. And then one night, I got a phone call. My wife answered the phone, and she said from the kitchen to the family room, she says, "It's for you." So I got up out of my lazy boy chair and says, "Who is it?" I whispered to her, and she says, "It's Carolyn Kennedy." Carolyn Kennedy. So I answered, "Hello," and she said, "Are you Dean?" She says, I said, "Yeah." She said, well, I'm Caroline Kennedy, and I'd like to tell you that you're the recipient of the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award. That award is given to an elected official who makes a decision of conscience that is right, but generally not popular. And believe me, it was not popular. I was speechless at the time of the call, and they made arrangements that we'd come to Boston to get the award, and our whole family went. We got 10 grandkids, and 9 of the 10 could go because one was just a little bit too young. And we had a great time, and Ted Kennedy was there, and it was after getting the award, we had a luncheon with the Kennedys and the Koldenhovens, and that's where Ted Kennedy says, this is the first time I remember a Koldenhoven family outnumbering the Kennedys. And he knows how to throw a party. We got interviewed by Katie Couric at Today's Show and Diane Sawyer on Good Morning America, and with Caroline Kennedy, and it was very nice to do that. And also on the stage with me when I got the thing was United Nations Secretary Kofi Annan. There's pictures in the back showing that. And the 9/11 heroes were a fireman, a police officer, and Marilyn Wills, of the Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army in the Pentagon. She led about 50-some people to safety because she knew a way out of that part where they were trapped after the bombing of the Pentagon. So she accepted the award for everybody who did work to rescue people. And that award stays at the Kennedy Library in Boston. So if you get out there, take a look at it. I cannot talk about the controversy in Palos Heights without the thought of my 35-year-old son, Don, who died of esophageal cancer at the very height of this controversy. This award has a special meaning for his memory also. As Caroline Kennedy has said, after people die, they really do live on through the people that love them. Father Cronin from St. Al's Church was asked to be part of the funeral, and I asked Pastor Hampshire if that was okay with him, and he said certainly, because they knew each other real well. And Father Cronin even had Mass said each time for my son at the Catholic Church. And at the funeral service, Pastor Hampshire did the eulogy for about 15 minutes, and then Cronin was supposed to offer a prayer. Well, he remarked about Reverend Hampshire's remarks, and they were so good. And then he prayed from the heart. He didn't pray from the book or anything. He prayed right from his heart. And after that was saying, we had an African-American woman sing gospel songs. And people that were really doubtful about having a priest, Catholic priest in a Christian Reformed church, erased that thing real quickly because they said, we got to have this guy back here. He's something else. What a speaker. So times change when you have something actually happen. My administrative assistant, which I was trying to say before, was Jenny Schenkel, and she has a mail process for me. She separates the business mail from the junk mail and puts a pile of each there so I know which one to get out of the way first. And then she came in the room and she said, I have a postcard here that I'd rather not you see. I said, well, now I gotta see it. So she handed it to me, and the picture in the front was nondescript, like a flower or something. But on the back it says, they buried the wrong Koldenhoven. I got choked up, and Jenny left the room, and I went for my Aretha Franklin CD and played What a Friend We Have in Jesus and Precious Lord. These songs gave me peace of mind and strength. There was a special meeting that the alderman called on a Friday. Donnie died on a Monday, was buried on a Thursday, and on Friday these aldermen called for a special meeting, something that's never been done before in Palos Heights. They have a day meeting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They thought I was still involved with the funeral. Mike Vanderweel was there, and he came in and he said, sterkte, which in Dutch means strength, the Lord's strength to you. And I felt that strength. Looking back on how things happened, I prayed, usually short prayers, but God gave me the strength even when I did not ask Him for it. I know I did nothing on my own without God's help. And after this, gave them the right to worship in our town by vetoing that action that the alderman did. The Muslims were not happy to stay there no more, and they gave us a lawsuit. And they handed me a lawsuit on Monday, and on Thursday, the Muslims in Orland Park wanted me to be there. They handed me an award for sticking up for the Muslims of Anti-Discrimination League of the Arab Americans gave me the award. So lawsuit in one hand, award in the other in the same week. We had a 5-day trial when it came to all the setbacks in 2005. 5 years later, it finally got to court, and it was in Judge Zagel's courtroom, the same judge that did the trial for former Governor Blagojevich, and a very wise judge, I'll say that. Once you're in the trial room and see how he operates his courtroom, he sure is a good judge. And we testified. I was on the stand for about 5 to 6 hours between both sides questioning me. And the verdict came down in favor of Palos Heights. And the reporters were all out in the hall waiting, and they asked, "You got a statement?" And I said, "If you tell the truth, the story never changes." I got a call from the State Department. It was on caller ID, Department of State, and I answered the phone myself on that one. I thought maybe they're going to tell me to back off on the columns I write for the Southtown Star newspaper. I wrote once a month as a guest columnist. I wrote for 6 years. I wrote quite a bit on George Bush's unjust war on the Iraqi people. I was a guest columnist for that paper, writing once a month column, but the State Department asked me to go to Russia and Ukraine to present the translated version of John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage. We went to the embassy and presented the book to about 400 people from all the eyebrows of Moscow and a lot of other officials, and that was very nice to do. And then we spoke at universities, about 2 universities a day in the Moscow area, and even gave the commencement address at the Russian American Christian University that's in Russia. They changed their name because of the word Christian there, and it's called Russian American University. And the president there is John Birnbaum. He's a former student alumni of Trinity Christian College. I got home on a Saturday night, and I got an email on Monday morning asking me to take a second trip to Russia, to go to Yekaterinburg, Chelyabinsk, and Zlatoust, speaking at universities. The State Department gave me a briefing, 53 pages, and they asked me if I could help out with a problem they had there. There was a case where the Russian Orthodox Church and the Baptist Church did not get along to the point of they firebombed the Baptist Church. And I went there, and they said, "You got 1 hour." And that 1 hour meeting turned into 3.5 hours. There were TV people there, journalists, NGOs, and it was a very good meeting, very productive. It ended up with hugs and shaking hands and a sign-up sheet for another meeting. And the answer is dialogue. It really is. That's what happened in that meeting. It's a time you can peaceably address disagreements and talk it out. It works. I recently received an email from an interpreter of the U.S. consulate in Yekaterinburg saying that the original group got together for a meeting in which they showed their love and understanding of each other's religion. It was a great success. And there's also a place called American Corners in Russia. It's a place where all Russian people can read all American newspapers and books and be well educated on their English, and they want everybody to speak English in those meeting rooms. So I was addressing that group there, and there was a man and a woman sitting in the front row, and I noticed that the girl was, actually it was the daughter of the man, and she was interpreting for him back in Russian what I was saying in English. And afterwards, question and answer, he didn't come up to me, but you got to stick around for the lemonade and cookies afterwards, which a lot of people don't do, but I did. It's a tradition that we do in our circle. So we talked then, and she says, would you mind if my father asked you a question? She said, I'll interpret. I had my own interpreter with me too, but it worked out well. When he says, I was a Russian soldier on the ship that brought the missiles to Cuba. Are you as an American mad at us for that? And I says, no, definitely not. Not me or not any Americans that I know are mad at you. You're a soldier, you were following orders, and you did what you were told to. And he gave me a big hug, and he was so relieved that we didn't hate him. And on this date, today's date, October 22nd, 50 years ago, 1962, President John F. Kennedy Went on television, tell a nation and world about the Cuban Missile Crisis. You can relate my story to this former Russian soldier and his daughter in a historical view. And Harvard University did a case study. They sent a person out here to Palos Heights. They've been collecting all the information since the day it started. And they sent it to interview the people that she was interested in. She was out for 4 days. And then they invited me to Harvard to talk to the divinity professors and the students who took the case study. And, you know, I'm just a high school graduate, and I was speaking at Harvard. I couldn't believe it. I pinched myself to say, I'm speaking at Harvard? I couldn't believe it. But they treated us nice, and at night, they told me, they say, you can want to go back to your room and freshen up and come back for the high table dinner tonight. And I really didn't know what that was. And I really didn't know what it was even after I went through the whole thing until I got to talk to Annalie Ward when I got home, and she's asked me how it went. And I told her about the high table. She explained to me about it. Well, what it is, when you get to the house, you're with the master of the house who introduces you to the highbrows of Harvard and Cambridge. And there's about 30 adults, and then there's the top students of the senior class were there in tuxedos, and the girls in nice women's wear. And they have the sherry, I think, first, along with some pastries. And then you go into a room where the high table is. It's the tables up here, and then tables down lower, and then all out the open is all the tables for the students to eat. And they serve this a meal out there in a high table dinner. And afterwards, you go back into the reception room and sit around and have a glass of port wine, correct? Port wine along with some more pastries, and they had a trio there playing some long-haired music. And it was a great evening. I really enjoyed it, and Harvard did a nice job of it, and we're still in contact with each other. And they recently told me that a rabbi in New York City near Ground Zero, where, what's the name of that place again? Ground Zero. And they were using a case study there of Palos Heights for discussions to help people have a better understanding of religious tolerance toward Muslims because of a Part 51, that's the name of it, Part 51 situation in New York. What strikes most of them who take the case study is the fact that the hatred against the Muslims started in Palos Heights about 1.5 years before 9/11. It was announced some time back that Osama bin Laden was killed by the Americans. When I heard that announcement, I said enthusiastically, yes, we got him. Then about 10 minutes later, I thought, should I be feeling like this? I went to the computer, and wouldn't you know it, there were several emails from the Building Bridges Not Walls group who experienced the same feeling. Then someone went to the scriptures and found several verses that tell us about the situation. One of the verses that fit the situation was Proverbs 24, verse 17. It says, rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thy heart be glad when he stumbleth. Wow, I think God knew that I would feel that way. That verse was just what I needed. Very recently, Gaddafi was killed, and when I heard it on TV, I immediately thought about not to gloat, and I remembered that verse in Proverbs. During the controversy, the word bigot surfaced, and I was accused of calling the residents bigots. I did not call them bigots, but what I did was I read from the dictionary the word bigot is described as a person who has no tolerance for a person's religion or a person's race. You may be confronted with a situation in your life when you have to make a decision that is right but not popular. I hope that it will be as easy for you, as I said earlier, a no-brainer. Students, whatever you have learned from your parents or guardians and in your spiritual life and from your studies here at Dubuque University, and for everyone as to what is right from wrong will possibly be tested someday. It is my hope that you choose what is right. If anyone feels that the Muslims are your enemy, Jesus had a backup plan for that. He said, love your enemies. When we love our neighbors and our enemies, as Jesus has said, it changes the definition of who we are. Thank you.
love to entertain some questions because sometimes that uncovers other pieces of the story. So there is a microphone in Tom's hands, and just raise your hand and he'll pass a microphone out if you can have any questions for him. Thanks.
Anyone got a question?
I'll get things started.
Way,
Got one?
way in the back. Way in the back. Stand up. He'll get the microphone to you. In the meantime, you guys think of a question and be ready for the next one.
Do you feel like that the response to just having a building being built would have been different if it was, say, Jews or Buddhists, or do you think it was just more hatred towards simply the Muslims?
If you're saying that if there were Buddhists making the same thing, would we have arisen? I don't know that answer because it didn't happen, and I would just assume that they'd probably be just as fearful of a Buddhist because we don't know enough about their religion either. So, but I have no way of telling that.
Okay.
But thank you for the question.
Yep.
Anyone else? You students better ask a question because the teachers are going to mark you on it. I'll tell you what, if you're in a group of 5 people, let's say, and one person makes a derogatory remark or expresses religious intolerance, it is your duty to stand up to them and tell them what they have said is wrong. If you don't do that, that person will go on repeating that remark. Also, by staying quiet, you're just as guilty. So if that ever happens again, you can change your way of doing things. Yes?
Is there something in your life that influenced you to make that choice? Your parents, how you grew up, maybe where you grew up?
Okay. Yes, thank you for that question. I had great parents. My dad was always open for good dialogue and also debate, and we had good times together. When there was a question arose about things, he really explained it well. And he spoke 5 languages himself, so he knew a lot about things that happen in the world, and he kept an interest in knowing what's going on. My parents were a big influence. My mother and father both had a great family discussion all the time, and we still carry that tradition on around our table that everything is open for discussion. We have some good times. Anyone else? Right after that.
Were there times when you thought and could feel that God was trying to work through you to create and to build these bridges with the community? And if you were feeling that, how did you use that strength? I'm assuming that at times it was scary, intimidating. It was you probably had some fear about this. And how were you able to use maybe your calling in this situation and where you were placed at that time? What questions were you asking yourself, and how were you finding those answers?
That's a good question, and I had complete confidence in the whole thing right along because, like I said, the no-brainer answer was, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and also that Jesus said, love your neighbor, and I just stuck with that. And I got to know a lot of Muslims because of this. I knew one in Palos Heights. Now I know hundreds, if not thousands of them. Not all personally, but as a group when I speak to them. And it's nice to know that we can do projects together now. But yeah, looking back at that time, there were certain people that stood out, like I mentioned, Father Cronin and Mike Vanderweel, that really, made an effort to give me support, where a lot of my friends did go silent. So you're in there alone, and my prayers are short, but they're really directly to God, and He knows where I stood. But He did take care of me all through that. I really felt that. Thank you. There was a hand right here. Yeah. Okay.
I asked you this earlier, do you think things have changed, attitudes have changed around the country in the past 12 years since this happened?
Yeah. Around the country, in general, I think they have improved because we learn more about them. We learn more about their faith. And there's still pockets of hatred going on in certain countries. We had one down in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, that they gave them a rough time down there, and I think they're still at it. I don't think it's really solved yet. So pockets of different locations will happen, but I get a kick out of it. The same objections they have to it are the same ones they have at all the ones, the same in mine. There's too much traffic, the kids are gonna get killed crossing the street, and the same thing, and they might have a call to prayer, and it might be too loud for the neighborhood, and even after they say no, there will not be the outside speakers, they still find fault with it. So it's mainly because they have a fear of not knowing them. That's what it is. And once they're informed about, they have this dialogue sessions, and it helps. And the newspapers, I gotta give it to the media, they did help the situation a lot because they called it like what it was. And a lot of people were a little disturbed by seeing their picture in the paper and the comments that they made. But when you make a statement, you're open to discussion. Anyone else?
I'd just like to ask if you think that we see the same level of intolerance in, let's say, bipartisan politics.
Good question. They're right around election time, too. Huh? Well, yeah, I don't want to give too much of my views about the two candidates, two presidential candidates. I do favor President Obama, and I like what he says. And I like a person that's completely in touch with all the people, not just 47% that he doesn't have a use for. That's really a big factor in my judgment, is that I want a man that will do that. And I believe that it is touchy among certain people that we're so-called friends with. I use that sparingly. We can't discuss politics. We can't discuss what's going on. There was a day when you could really have a down and out, have a good discussion, loud, maybe, but nobody hit each other or nothing like that. But there was a time you could do that. In 2012, you can't do that. I don't know why. It's just like you gotta select your person you're talking with. Unless somebody got a very good open mind and can challenge you, then it's fun. Then it's fun to talk politics. But people are doubtful. Some people won't put signs out because they says, well, I don't know what they'll think of me if I favor one candidate or another. There used to be, there were signs all over. You could always put signs and ask the people, yeah, go ahead and stick a sign out there, you know. Today it's held back. They're afraid like they might get criticized by other people. Or maybe if you're a business person, they think they won't do business with me because I favor Obama or I favor Romney. So you got to be careful today, you know, who you support openly. I don't much care. I mean, if someone asks me, like you just did, I will tell you, yes, I am an Obama person. But thank you for your question. Is that the answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you receive any kind of resistance from the 11 pastors, or were they mostly behind you with your views?
My own pastor called for a meeting with the other churches, and 9 of the 11 agreed to write a letter in support of my decision of what I did. And 9 of the 11, 2 would not support it. But yes, they attempted to make it well.
This really isn't a question, but I think you're a great communicator, and you have the courage to speak the truth that we're all, you know, basically one people. So my encouragement to you is to just keep speaking to people. If everyone in the world would take what you're saying to heart, we maybe could have peace.
Thank you very much. I have a lot of fun talking with high school kids also, with government groups. We've even organized debate, a real actual debate, where one side goes against the other side. And we had a lot of fun doing it. We name an issue and then we discuss it. It's a good way to break a kid in at high school age to say, if you want to someday run for office, think about it. And whenever you're married and get out of college or got a job and you settle down in a certain neighborhood, ask the mayor of that town to say, hey, do you have an opening on any of your committees, such as zoning or whatever? And there might be, and say, join up with that. And I made the mistake of saying, not a mistake really, it's the truth. I just said, there's no age limit. It doesn't matter what age you are, you can always help somehow. And some of the kids challenged me. They said, oh, no age limit. What are you doing at your age? What are you doing politically? And I said, nothing right now. Oh, so then along came the lieutenant governor position in the state of Illinois the last time around, and it was open. They put it online. Whoever wants to be lieutenant governor, say it. And signed up. There was 320 people that signed up, and I signed up with it. And we had 3 places where we had to speak. Of the 320, they broke it in 4 different regions. And the bottom line was, the Saturday they picked Sheila Simon, was I came in 12th from the back, from behind. But I ran not knowing I would even get that close, but it turned out that it did. So there is possibility if you want to get back in it at any age or participate, you can do it. This is still a country where you can be in politics.
As a great communicator who stands for equality, what would you tell to Muslim brothers and sisters who don't like Christians? What would you tell them?
Well, I meet with Muslim people. We have dinners together. I learned to eat Arabic food. I'm starting to like it. Very cautious, when you eat some different foods. And my dad was, again, they say, where'd it come from? My dad had a milk route, and he had all different nationalities who he had. And they would always like to make him food because he enjoyed eating. And he tried to say, why don't you eat this food and that food? And I said, I can't, Dad. I can't. It's too spicy or something, So that was good practice for what was coming with the Muslim food. But I have a good time with them. We get together, have good times. And on November 10th, we're at Trinity Christian College, the Christian Reformed Church is holding an open meeting about Muslims and Christians. So you got to work at it to make it happen. Any other questions?
You have an extended family. You must have received threats, and they must have received threats. Will you discuss that?
I did not receive any personal threats. I'm a person that walked very freely. The only thing I did, the first time of the week that it was really hot and heavy, I did look at my mailbox from back here. That they're just liable to put something in there to jump out at me. Not a bomb or nothing, but I just thought somebody liable to just want to freak me out. But nothing. There was no acts of violence at all. So one night there was a person in the audience that's sitting right next to my son who attended right about in the middle of the audience. And he said something really bad about me, and my son's glaring at me like, you want me to do something? I'm just shaking my head like this. Real sober face. I looked at him. Don't do anything. It'd be the last thing I want to see is my son get up and smack him, But that's as close as it came. There was no violence of any kind. I got threatened with words, and it was at the meeting that was in the gym. I had to walk from the back of the room up to the front. And along the wall, there was about people 4 deep, and one guy stood out in front of me as I was walking. He stopped me, and he let loose a whole bunch of expletives, and he said things that he would do to me and everything else, and I just stared at him. As you know, I've been in construction all my life. I've heard just about every word imaginable that you can. Some of those even said you were even short a couple hundred. And I says, it doesn't bother me. That stuff doesn't bother me at all. So get out of my way, please. I got to go up there. And he stepped aside. So it worked. Anyone else? There's somebody in the back with their hand up. There it is, against the back wall. Good thing for microphones. We should have more of them.
I'd like to first thank you for coming out, Mr. Koldenhoven. And also the question that I had is that you faced a lot of adversity and you spoke out against something that you didn't feel very comfortable or was going on right. What kind of advice do you have for just the University of Dubuque or even just the student bodies for them to vote even though they don't feel that either party is someone they would like to support?
Repeat that last part about the party.
Now, I've talked to a couple of students and they feel that both Obama and Romney, they don't support either one of them and they don't want to participate in voting. What kind of advice would you give them to still voice their thoughts, feelings, and whatever if they don't want to vote?
Well, they really are passing up one of the most best opportunities in their life to experience democracy at its best. When I went to Russia, I really found out the feeling of those people, how much important it means to them that they could vote. Because since 1917, I believe the year was, till 1989, communism ruled Russia. And they weren't allowed to worship. The Russian Orthodox Church was the only one they would partially accept. Every other church had to go underground in order to worship. They had to hide in secret to worship. And to say that the freedoms that we have in this country, that Constitution, there's 5 freedoms in the First Amendment, and to say that we have all these freedoms and you would pass that up, you know, it's just a shame that they would want to pass that up and not participate. I think they will, if they live under normal conditions in this country, that they will regret that they didn't be more active in the years that they could have, especially at a university. They should participate. You should have a debate going on in clubs so you take Romney, I'll take Obama, and discuss the issues and really have a good old-fashioned debate. And that's what's needed, is get it out, talk it out, and you learn from it. But I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yep. Hey there.
One last question.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Now, since Muslims and Christians have completely different views about who the person of Jesus Christ was, have you had any experience talking to a Muslim about your beliefs and who Jesus was?
Yes, I have. They believe that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. They believe that Jesus is a prophet. And when I quiz them on where is Jesus, that he is with God, but they don't claim he is the Son of God. So when I see the differences from what a Christian view is and a Muslim's view, I feel in my heart there's time to resolve this. You don't have to go out and charge right at it that same evening and give that answer right back to them. No, you're wrong, or this or that. Let it happen. And then all at once, when they can tell me that, please talk more about Jesus, it gives me the greatest feeling. And when I was asked to speak at their convention at the Hyatt Regency in Chicago, I said, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, could you talk about Jesus, something that he did? And I talked about the parable of the rich man and the poor man. And I says, how did you, they asked for it. They asked about Jesus. So they're inquisitive about Jesus more so, but they do believe in those things that I said. But they're close, but not there as far as what the Christian viewpoint is. But they got their reasons, and I'm learning about Muhammad, and they're learning more about Jesus, and we get along, and we call each other, we email each other, we have different meetings we go to. Everybody greets each other. It's a nice feeling, and that can happen. You can just got to make it happen. You got to participate yourself in it. One last question. Is that it? That's it. Has anybody got one more just for the heck of it? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you for listening to this story of moral courage, and appreciate your comments, Dick. I want to encourage you all to look for those opportunities to stand up for what you believe is right, and speak out. If you have more questions or comments, he's around, would love to talk to you. On your way out, please take a look at the Profiles Encourage Tiffany lamp and some of the things back on the back table. Thanks again.